and thank you for logging in for today's online teaching sessions for the PHU students, as of course the faculty is also getting benefited by these sessions. First of all, I should thank Dr. Venkat Raman Radhakrishnan, who is a dear friend and a colleague, professor of medical oncology at Adyar Cancer Institute in Chennai. I was telling him before that I think this is a very difficult topic probably to speak on, but a very important topic. I think all of us logged in here will agree that we do a lot of work. I would say clinical research work, but most of the times it doesn't see the the light of the publication. And one of the I would say the biggest hurdles is to kind of put the work we have done on paper and send it for publications. So he's going to be discussing that with us today, and that's in the capacity of him being well published, and also his experience on editorial and review board of various journals. So a very appropriate colleague on to talk on how to publish a manuscript. So with that, a little introduction, I will ask Venkat to start. But before we do that, I think there will be some thought processes on the timing of these sessions. I think we will send across another questionnaire. We had done a survey before, and this was the time which was selected, and that was during the COVID lockdown. We'll send another survey and we'll check with all of you whether you want any time change for these sessions, and also whether you want these sessions to be once in 2 weeks rather than once in a week. Although we have planned the sessions weekly till end of this year, till end of December, but post that we want them to be once in 2 weeks, and also the timing, because the works are picking up, and it depends on whether this time is still suitable for most of us. So that will be sent across in the due course. Dr. Venkat Raman, thank you very much again, and if you could start your presentation. So he'll be talking for the next 40-45 minutes, and then any doubts, any questions which we have, we'll ask him after the presentation is over. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sunil and PHU team for this opportunity. Is my screen visible and am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon to all. So today I'm going to talk to you about how to write a manuscript. Now, writing a manuscript is more of an art rather than science. It's like learning how to play a guitar or learning how to swim. So you will have to go through the process, and you will have to keep on doing it to maintain your skills. And different people learn at different rates, and some people learn it quickly, some people take it time, but you need to keep on doing this to maintain your skills. So the question is, why write a paper? For some of us, it is mandatory to write a paper. In many universities, the postgraduates have to submit a thesis. At least in the super specialty programs, you're supposed to write a paper. You have to write, you have to present a poster and have an oral presentation. So for this, you need to know how to write an abstract at least. If you're working in an academic institution, then writing papers is important, or writing grants is important, because you need to get promotions, and these are dependent upon the quality and the type of papers you write. And it's a world of publish or perish. And if you want to stand out among your peers, then it's important that you publish your research work. And even if you're not in academia, excellent work is being done in people who are working in the corporate sector and the private sector, who are doing good research and who want to change the practice across the world. So even if they want to tell the world what they're doing, they need to know how to write a paper, because without writing a paper, the word is not going to go out. So before starting, before writing, even putting pen to the paper, you need to know certain things. First is know your audience. Whom are you going to write to? So we're all pediatric oncologists. So our main audience is going to be pediatric oncologists. So we are not going to write for cardiologists or nephrologists unless the topic is like that way. So we need to know what our audience is, what is their knowledge level, and how we are going to write to them. Also target a journal. All of us do research, but we need to aim a journal. I can't do a small retrospective study and target New England Journal of Medicine or Journal of Clinical Oncology. If my research is that good, I need to target that kind of journal. But if not, I should, target a journal which would most likely accept my paper. Read the instructions of a journal website. Many people don't do that. Every journal has instructions on how to write a paper, how to structure it, how to format it, what's the word count. Imagine you end up writing a paper for 10,000 words and the journal instruction says you need to write only 2,000 words, then you'll have to chop almost 75% of your paper to get it through the journal. After reading the journal website, format your manuscript accordingly. I know it's a pain because different journals have different formatting procedures, but that's the way it is. Another important thing is don't fall prey to predatory journals. Now, all of us get emails that, dear doctor, good morning, good evening, and we are so happy to have you as an author. Most of these journals are run from small bylanes in Daryaganj or in Gautam Nagar. They don't have a proper editorial board. They charge you money for publishing. Many people fall for it, and it actually reduces your credibility if you start publishing in these journals. The best way is to see if the journal is indexed in proper indexing services like the PubMed. Go and see the website to see if you can see who are the editors, look at the issues, look at the formatting, and just whether a journal is actually famous in your field or not. So please avoid predatory journals. And I think the most important point I would stress is before you start writing papers, you have to read scientific papers. Start reading papers from the Pediatric Blood and Cancer, the Pediatric Hematology Oncology Journal, which is our own PHO journal, NEJM, JCO, Lancet Oncology. Read through them, look at the style, look at how the paper is formatted, look how the figures have been put, look how the tables have been made, look how the language is. So these are important things because you need to read at least for 50 to 100 papers before even you start writing your own paper. Next step is look back at your research. When you're writing a paper, ask yourself, is my research new and interesting? Have I done my research properly? Are my methods valid and reliable? Was my data accurate? Did I get ethical clearance? Never do any research without ethical clearance. It's mandatory to get ethics clearance for publishing any paper. Can you tell a story with your findings? Are you aware of your limitations of your study? And does your research offer solutions to the problems you're facing? If you're unable to answer any of these questions, you need to go back to your drawing board. You need to go back to your research. You need to redo it. You need to recollect your data. You need to correct your data. And then only you need to start thinking about writing your paper. There are a lot of ways of writing your research. It starts from the small letter to editor or correspondence, then case reports, case series. Original research is the gold standard. Then you have meta-analysis, which looks at a lot of original research, review articles, editorials, and perspectives. So as a student, you should initially focus on your correspondence and case reports and case series. As you become an eminent person, you become an HOD or a director, then you can start writing review articles, editorials, or perspectives, because these are generally solicited by editors for people who have established themselves in the field. So start small and then aim for big. I will directly go to how to write a research article. I will come to case reports later, because if you know how to write a research article, you should be able to write other types of articles as well. The first and most important part of a research article is the title. Title is like your name. Your study is identified by the title. Then you have the abstract, which is further divided into backgrounds, methods, results, and conclusions. Then you have the main text, which is further divided into introduction or background, methods, which can be either material if you're working in the lab, or be patients if you're doing a clinical work. You have the results, discussion, and references. Then the figures of the paper, the tables. This is called the IMRAD format. IMRAD stands for the introduction, methods, results, and discussion. All scientific journals follow the IMRAD format for the main text. So if you write any paper on the IMRAD format, you can easily submit to most of the journals with just some slight modifications. Coming on to the first part of the paper, which is the title. A title should be good and catchy. It should contain as few words as possible, and it should adequately describe the contents of a paper. So a title should have the main findings of your research, be very specific, be concise, be complete, and it should attract readers. For example, we just recently did a study on olanzapine. So our title was Olanzapine versus Metoclopramide for treating breakthrough nausea and vomiting in children with cancer, a phase 2 open label randomized clinical trial. So the title says that we are comparing olanzapine with metoclopramide. We're looking at patients who developed breakthrough vomiting. We're looking at children with cancer. We are doing a randomized trial comparing both these drugs. It's an open label, that is, we didn't use a placebo. and it wants to see which one of them is better. So the title should be clear and concise. Don't use unnecessary jargon in titles. Don't use abbreviations in titles, especially uncommon ones. Don't use ambiguous terms. Don't use unnecessary details. Your title should not be as long as your abstract. And usually focus on the main content of your article. The next, and I would say the most important part of a study, is the abstract. When I mean abstract, it's not an abstract painting here like this. Because I'm an editor for 2 journals, and the first thing I see when somebody sends a paper is I look at the abstract. I reject most of the papers if I don't find the abstract very interesting. So you, more than the paper, you have to put a lot of efforts in writing your abstract. As I said, the quality of the abstract strongly influences the editor's decision. Make sure that your abstract is precise and honest. It can stand alone. That is, people should get an idea of your paper just by reading the abstract, and most of us just do it. Most of us don't have time to read full papers. Even if you get an exciting study from NEJM or Lancet, we just read the abstract and come to the conclusion. It should be very brief and specific. Try avoiding technical jargon. Again, minimize use of abbreviation. Obviously, abstracts has no references, so you need not add any references in the abstract. I would put it that use the abstract to sell your article. You're like a salesman. You have got 2 minutes or 3 minutes to attract a reader or an editor, and you need to sell your pen, or you say a laptop, to the editor, and you need, so that your abstract needs to be very crucial. This is a busy slide, but I put it up for residents so that they know how to structure an abstract. So abstract, just like the main text, has 4 parts. The first is the background and introduction. So in the background, write what is your subject about 1 to 2 introductory sentences that explain the topic, the purpose, and research question. The background should not be very in-depth like the results, but it should just say what is the purpose of your study, or what's your research question. The second thing is the methods. This is how did you conduct your research, and how did you generate your results, and what were the statistical methods used. The main chunk of the paper is the results. This is because what did you find? Was there anything interesting that you found? And finally, the conclusion. What is the take-home message of your study or project? Now, it should be 1 to 2 sentences. And your conclusions are your study's contribution to the field. So this is the way you can structure your abstract. Now, coming to the third part of a paper, this is the main text. We follow the IMRATS method, which is introduction, methods, results, and discussion. Introduction is about what did you do and what others have done and why you did the study. Methods is how you did the study. Results is what did you find in your study. And discussion is what does it mean to everybody. I'll go on to the introduction. Introduction is basically selling, telling people why you did it. What is the problem you're trying to solve? Are there any solutions to your problems? If so, what is the best solutions? What are the limitations of currently available solutions? What is that your work is trying to achieve? And the last, just before you start your methods, you just need to outline what was done and what was achieved in the final paragraph. My tips for introduction are: be very brief. Introduction should not be a literature review. Cite few work, original and recent work. Do not bring in your results, conclusions, and discussion in the introduction. Introduction is like your starter. The reader starts just getting a flavor before he jumps into your paper. The next part is the methods part. Methods part is the main course of your paper. It should be the bulk of your paper and the meatiest part of the paper. Many senior authors first read the methods before even they start reading the results and introduction. It should provide sufficient information on which the paper, in which the reader can get an idea how the study was done. So if I'm sitting and reading a paper mentally, if I read the methods, I should kind of say, okay, they did this. This is how they got the results. There should be no ambiguity. No, I should be asking, how did they do this? How did they introduce this drug? What was the dose they used? So that's very important that your method section is very elaborate. So some of the components in the methods is: where did you conduct the study and what was the time frame? For example, this study was conducted at Cancer Institute from 2015 to 2017. Was ethical clearance obtained? If it is a clinical trial, was it registered with the Clinical Trial Registry of India? You need to give your ethical clearance number and your trial registration number. How were the patient consented? Obviously, you're not going to put people in studies without consent. What was your primary objective? when did you stop your study? That is, what were your endpoints? What are inclusion and exclusion criteria? No, if it's a retrospective study, you still need to have inclusion criteria. If you are looking at non-metastatic osteosarcoma, your inclusion criteria may be all osteosarcomas less than 18 years who did not have any lung or distant metastasis. Your exclusion criteria will be any patients been treated partially outside and then came to your hospital. So that is very important to include. What were the doses of the drugs used? What was the schedule of chemotherapy used? If you just write, we used CHOP chemotherapy, you're not sure whether you gave CHOP every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whether you gave the full dose CHOP or you reduce the doses. What are the procedures followed? Did your patients undergo bone marrows, lumbar puncture? When did you do your CT scans? That is important to describe your method section. It is also important to know how the data was captured. If it's a prospective study, did you have a prospective database? Or did you get the data from the case records and enter into an Excel sheet? If you are looking at a case series, how are your patients followed up? This is important because if you're following up patients irregularly, then your outcomes might not be captured properly. And finally, the statistical section. How did you define for overall survival, event-free survival? What statistical test was used? What software was used? What was the significant level you had taken? So as you said, methods as various components. If you just keep the slide with you when you're writing your paper and just take each one of these points before you write your paper, I'm sure it'll be very easy for you to write your method section. Coming on to the results, again, there are a lot of cartoons here. My boss used to tell that, never go with an expectation when you're doing a study. I should not think that, yes, this drug is going to work, or yes, this drug is not going to work. Because then you would be biased, and then you would try to torture the data to, so that it'll start confessing on its own. Present results as it is. Okay. And this is happening in the COVID scenario. You have a very good abstract, very good introduction, but there's nothing in the results. So my tips for results are, first draw your figures and tables. I'll tell you why. Because when you have your figures and tables, it's easy to sit and write your results section, because you already have your number of patients, male, females, responders, non-responders, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 toxicities. You can look at your figures and write your results. Don't duplicate data. If you have written something in a table or figure, you can always mention the results that this has already been given figures and tables. Do not discuss the implication of your findings or review the literature in your results section. Result is what you saw and what are the facts. Start with demographic features, like there were 200 patients who came to your center, out of which 100 were recruited. The median age was 15 years, 50% were boys or girls. So start with that. Then you can divide them into sections so that it becomes easy for the reader to understand. So you can start with your, say, the chemo doses, and then toxicity, and then final survival analysis. As I said, report all results. If something doesn't suit your narrative, please do not omit those results, because this is for the good of patients and science. Always mention results of statistical tests. Just don't use the word significant. If it's not statistically significant, don't use the word significant. Mention the exact p-value. We commonly see people putting p less than 0.05. If it's 0.03, mention it as 0.03. Again, when you give percentages, please use numerator or denominator. You can say all 100% of patients are surviving. Your 100% could be one patient. So it's important to mention, when you have percentages, please mention the numerator and denominator. And when you have a normally distributed data, please give it the mean and standard deviation, because you can have a very wide standard deviation. That means your experiment might not be accurate if it's repeated again and again. Coming on to the last main part of the discussion. Discussion is as if you're discussing or debating with somebody. So you describe what your results mean. Were the methods successful? How did the findings relate to those of other studies? And what were the limitations of their studies? If you take these 4 points, you can easily write at least 1 to 1.5 pages of a discussion for your study. This is a busy table. This people can read through how beautifully this discussion has been written. I'm not going to go through it. It just uses the same technique which I've told you in the last slide. These are some of the tips I would like to give you about the discussion section. Discussion should correspond to the results, but it should not be the results. Many people tend to repeat what they have written in the results again in discussion. Do not make grand statements that do not support your methods or results. You should not go and say that we have found a cure for cancer, or this is a path-breaking treatment. Try to tone down. Do not introduce things which you have not discussed in your introduction, methods, or results in the discussion, because suddenly you start talking about a new technique which you have done, but you're not even mentioned about the technique in your methods or in your research. That's highly inappropriate. Again, avoid using unspecific expressions. Don't use terms like high temperature or a lower rate. Mention with high temperature, you can say patients had a temperature more than 39 degrees centigrade, or the patients who had vomiting with phosphopriptan was less than 30%. So use quantitative description, because then it's up to the reader's imagination to take what is high or what is low. Again, do not speculate. Whatever you say, please root it in fact. Also, compare what is published in research with your own results, literature. Do not ignore work which is in disagreement with yours. We have ourselves seen there are some trials which are positive and there are some trials which are negative, because you cannot convince your readers if you're not able to, put in front of them whatever is available in the literature. The final part is conclusion. It should be very brief. You just need to tell how your work advances the field, what are the applications for your work, and if there are any future experiments or future things which you would like to build upon or others can build upon than what you have already done. Again, in conclusions, avoid downplaying negative results. Do not make personal statements or opinions without scientific support in conclusion. Again, do not repeat your introduction, methods, and results in your conclusion. And do not overemphasize the impact of your study in the conclusion. References are also important. Again, many people do not give importance to references. Avoid too many references. Avoid self-citation. I might have published 50 papers. I should not be citing my own papers. That is not considered professional. Again, do not put personal communications or unpublished observations in your references. And try avoiding references which are in local language. Make sure that your references are cited in the text as per the journal requirements. The authors' names are spelled correctly. Your punctuation is correct. And some journals ask you to include all authors. Some say include et al. After 3. Some say include et al. After 6. So please read the journal website. Again, there are different references style like the American Medical Association, APA, Harvard, and Vancouver. Again, varies from journal to journal. You can use a reference software like Zotero, Mendeley, or EndNote. This makes your life easy because you can change the journal style based on the software, using the software. So far it's been didactic on how to write a paper. I'll tell you how to organize your manuscript, what to start first. You have done your research, you have a data. I would start with preparing the figures and tables. Then I would write the method section. As I said, this is the biggest part and easy to do because you know what you have done. Then I would write up the results. After the results, it's easy for me to write the discussion because my discussion is based on the results and I've already written the methods. Then I write a conclusion because you need to write a conclusion only after you've written your discussion. After all of them, I write a compelling introduction. Finally, the abstract. As I said, you need to sell your abstract. Then the title. Then other things like selecting keywords, acknowledgements, and references. Many of us start with writing the introduction, then the methods, then the results, then the discussion. Then your paper won't have the flow. You will not be able to, give the real punch which you want to give it to the editor and readers. So if you do it in this way, I'm sure you would be able to write a better paper. Again, I don't know to write. How am I going to write? I've never written anything. The first draft of anything is shit. So please keep calm and write a shitty first draft. Every manuscript starts as a shitty first draft. We all write it and then we slowly improve on it. So there are, multiple revisions. So I have like manuscript 1, manuscript 1.1, manuscript 2, manuscript final 1.1. So if you go into my folder, some of my manuscripts have 40 versions. But you need to start writing somewhere. Whatever thought comes into your mind, please write it. Another common mistake which a lot of people, especially juniors, do is that they tend to copy. Plagiarism is a very serious offense. Do not cut, copy, paste directly from other articles. As an editor, I have seen there are softwares available which can pick up plagiarism. Or all I need to do is just cut, copy, paste a few paragraphs into Google and it just comes up. Now, this is a very serious offense. In many countries like US and UK, you can lose your job. If you're studying in a residency, you can lose your residency. Wikipedia is also not a reference. I've seen people cut, copy, and paste Wikipedia into the articles. So please avoid plagiarism. Also avoid self-plagiarism. That is, Please do not cut, copy, paste from some article which you've written 1 year back. You cannot even use your own work again and again. If you are quoting somebody, please cite it. Please give a reference. Do not quote anybody without citing it. That's why references are very important. How to format your paper? A lot of residents put up papers to me. They're very unformatted. It takes me hours just to format the paper. So if you're giving your paper to your senior or your teacher, make it nice and presentable. The food we eat is better if it looks nice to eat. So use a font like Times New Roman or Arial. Use a font size 12. Double space your paper so that it's easy to read and you can mark anything if you want to make any changes. Put the titles in bold. Always number the pages so that I could say that, okay, page number 2, this paragraph, please change it. Justify it. Justify is a symbol you can see in Word. I've put it here so that it looks aligned and looks neat and clean. Again, when you're writing, you need to remember 3 C's. That is, your writing should be clear, it should be concise, and it should be correct. And avoid following these traps. That is repetition, redundancy, ambiguity, and don't exaggerate. I've already mentioned this. Coming to a language, English is not our mother tongue. It's not our first language. Many of us would have got reviewers saying that the language and grammar is poor, the English is poor. I have got it multiple times. So the best way to avoid is to use short sentences, use very simple words, use scientific words. Always expand abbreviations at first instance. So if you have performance status, put PS and then you can use PS. If it's World Health Organization, write WHO, World Health Organization, and then start using WHO. Do not create your own abbreviations. That is, don't use abbreviations which are not standard. I've already mentioned when you're providing percentages, always use numerator and denominator and vice versa. Again, as I said, English is not our first language. Try to use scientific language. And sometimes Indian English can be very funny, and Western reviewers and editors can, some of them might not even have heard such words. Like there's no prepone, and we use the word prepone a lot. So instead of seen, since we are scientists, better to use observed rather than did. I did this study. We performed this study because you perform an experiment. All of can be shorted to all, both of to both, in order to as to, majority as most, since, because, while can be written as and, but, although, and whereas. So these are some small examples. It's better you can sit with a thesaurus and see which is the best word to use in your scientific paper. This is very common in pharma papers because pharma companies want to sell their drugs. So you get words like game changer, breakthrough, miracle, revolutionary, groundbreaking, pioneering, best. We are the first to publish. This is the first study from India. It's better to avoid all these terms because they are sensational. They don't add anything to the study. Try to tone down using these words, and it doesn't help patients as well. Various journals use various guidelines for reporting research. So for example, if you are reporting a randomized trial, you have the consort guidelines, and there are 25 items. So it's better to open the consort guidelines. All these 25 items should be available in your paper. Journals would not accept randomized trials if they do not adhere to consort guidelines. Similarly, for observational studies, you have the STROBE guidelines. For meta-analysis, you have the PRISMA guidelines. And all these guidelines are freely available on the net. So you can read through these guidelines before submitting a paper. Most important is, remember, be honest, be ethical, because your research impacts patients' lives. I have seen senior colleagues writing research papers, even randomized trials, even without conducting these trials. That is a big disservice to science and patients, and it brings a bad name to our country, our institutions, and our profession. So please don't do that. Even before you submit your paper, get a second opinion. Because when I write my paper, I feel I'm going to win the Nobel Prize. I've done the best research in the world and I'm very elated. It's when I show my papers to my colleagues and my co-authors and my seniors, that's when I realize that, okay, there are so many things which I missed, and there are so many things which are contradictory, and this doesn't look right. So don't be scared. It's better your colleague or your friend reviews your paper and before it goes to the peer reviewer. That makes your job easier. So send it out to as many people as possible. Be after them, ask them to give constructive comments, and try improving your paper. The last part, I'll come to case reports. I am purposefully keeping case reports at the end, although I said when you're students, better to start writing case reports, because once you know how to write a research paper, case report should be a walk in the park. Not every case can be a case report. You need to have some unusual observations. That is, it should be rare, it should be exciting. You can report about adverse response to therapies. You can share a new theory, or you can question a new current theory, or it could be a personal impact. So choose your cases judiciously. There are famous case reports. The pneumocystis was first reported as case report. HIV was first reported as case report. Same for Kaposi sarcoma, and Christian Barnard reported his first heart transplant as a case report. So case reports can have an impact. The case report has a title. Try to keep it as short as informative. Abstract is unstructured, like a research article is usually 100 words, short and concise. Keep your introduction very brief in the case report, and at the end, say a line about the patient and the problem. In the case, this is your methods and your results combined together. Give a brief description of the patient, followed by the brief history of the case. What were the examination findings? What were the lab findings, pathology, radiology, whatever you have? What was your treatment plan? What was the expected outcome of your treatment plan, and what actually happened to the case? And then discuss, why is your case noteworthy, and why should others be interested in this case, and what problem it addresses, and has it been reported in the literature, and compare it with what has been reported in the literature. Again, very important to take patient consent. If you're using photos, anonymize it. That is, please do not show the eyes. If you're using scans, make sure that all patient information, including a hospital number, hospital name, everything is anonymized. So you have written your paper. Sometimes it takes 1 year to write a paper. Everything is fine. Your colleagues have seen through it. Then you need to submit. Again, you have to decide which journal to submit. Before you submit, write a cover letter to the editor asking why you're writing this paper, how is it important, why it should be published in the journal. Ensure that your paper meets the word limit, because if you send a paper which is 3-4 times the word limit, it's going to come back to you. Also, make sure that you have a final file. As I said, you might have 50 files. You might be working version 1, 2, 3, 4. You should not end up submitting your first draft instead of your final draft. So I always make the final file for submission, where I keep all the figures, tables, first page, your cover letter, so that you don't upload the wrong files. I've done this in the past. Again, warning, do not submit your paper to multiple journals at the same time. Journals will find out it's unethical. So if you are submitting to one journal, wait for the journal to get back and then submit to the next journal. After that, it's a waiting game. Peer review can be ruthless. As this cartoon says, you start young, and by the time your manuscript comes out, you're totally haggard. But that is a way to ensure that, we put quality stuff out. Otherwise, anybody can be publishing anything. Your paper comes back, and it can be a major revision or a minor revision. And sometimes the revision of the paper is more difficult than your actual paper as well. This is a nice cartoon. It started off with a car. It's turned into limousine and a tank, probably a holiday home and a restaurant, because the reviewers asked for it. So when you get a letter from the journal and the reviewer, sit over it for 1 or 2 days. Don't jump and don't start panicking. Read it 2-3 times. Read them thoroughly. Initially, it might look as if that, oh God, what are they asking? I can't do this. This is ridiculous. How am I supposed to get this data? But over time, it starts making sense, and yeah, I can do it now. Always respond politely to the reviewers, because the reviewers can reject your paper. So always be humble and polite. Thank them. Say thank you for reviewing, because reviewing is a thankless job. Nobody gets paid for reviewing papers. We have to take time out from our personal life to review papers. Respond to each query of the reviewer point-wise, and also mention the page and paragraph where the changes have been made. If your reviewer wants to add something, you say, yes, I've done this in the results section, and it's in the page 4 in the second paragraph. Journals can either ask you to highlight the changes in different colors, or you can do track changes in the Word. Always incorporate all the suggestions which the reviewers ask, unless it is ridiculous or totally against science. If you feel that the reviewers' comments are inappropriate or not justified, then respond to them very professionally why you disagree. You say, yeah, their comments are great. However, we are unable to do this because we didn't have the finances to do this test, or our sample size was limited because of low recruitment. So you have to justify that. Sometimes some reviewers can be really nasty and unprofessional. In such case, do not engage with such reviewers. Please contact the editors directly, and the editor will take care of such reviewers. Rejections are very common. All of us face rejections. As I said, we take in a lot of time and effort to write a paper. It gets rejected, but don't take rejection personally, because rejection is part of the game. Every paper finds a home. I still remember one of our papers on osteosarcoma, Ewing sarcoma of the clavicle, got rejected in 10 journals, and it found a home in the 11th journal, and it was Indian Pediatrics. I'm still very happy, proud of the paper. So keep on trying. Just because your paper comes back, don't end up submitting to another journal. That is, try submitting to the other journal. But again, address the reviewer's comments before submitting. If you might end up having the same reviewer reviewing the same paper for a different journal. So make sure that you address all the comments and then submit the paper. It's not that you get a rejection and immediately you load the same paper again. So make sure that you have done your homework before submit again. And if your paper gets accepted, celebrate, have a party, and then get back, start your day again tomorrow to do one more research and start the whole cycle of writing the paper, submitting, rejection, success. So thank you very much. I hope I've been able to cover all the parts. I'm sure there are many more senior people in this group. This is based on my experience. As I said, paper writing is an art, and different people have different opinions how to write your paper, and I'm ready to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Venkat. It was excellent. Especially your cartoons were amazing. So I think you put it so subtly, but very clearly. I think it's probably one of the best talks I have heard on how to write a paper. Thank you very much for doing this excellent job. So if any questions are there, I think in the meantime, this was a question which is kind of asked very frequently. That is on figures. Especially in oncology, where you have to do survival curves and other things. So what is your take on that? What is the best way, our students can have those done? Because most of the institutions may not have a great biostatistical support. So how do you do that, and what's your tip for the students?
Thank you, Sunil. Stats are difficult. I was lucky to get trained in stats. At least the basic
Just 1 second, Dr. Venkat. Ria, can we mute everyone? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, now you have to unmute Venkat.
Yes. So as you said, many institutions don't have biostatisticians. I would recommend that every student at least tries to undergo a basic statistics course. Many people are offering that, and at least learn SPSS. It's not very difficult to do survival analysis. Probably 1 hour on SPSS would help everybody learn how to do survival analysis. And from SPSS, just copy paste. All of us are comfortable using laptop tabs, and SPSS is very easy to use. If not, then you need to contact a biostatistician who can do your survival curves. But yeah, this is something, as doctor, I find mathematics tough. I find statistics very tough. So I try to get the help. Some things which are easy, I try to do myself, but other things I need to get help. But if somebody can do a stats course, hands-on stats course, that is just listening a stat lecture won't help you. You need to sit with a computer and laptop. Some institutions do that, and you need to sit and learn how to do stats. And if somebody knows in your department, they can actually sit with you and teach. So we teach our residents who are faculty know stats, and they teach the juniors and so on. So that is also, you have to pass on the knowledge.
Mamta ma'am, maybe you have to unmute yourself. Okay. Ria, I think you have to unmute Dr. Manglani, please.
Yes, sir.
Or make her a co-host.
Yeah. Thank you, Sunil. Venkat, wonderful. Though I was busy with another meeting and I couldn't join from the very beginning, but whatever I attended, I enjoyed. It's lucidly put, and you brought out the points that are most practically required for anybody who's a beginner to write, or even those who have been writing. I had a couple of queries in my mind related to what you said about one is plagiarism. So when I write, there are certain things which I cannot modify in any other way as it is already put in most papers. And that always gets highlighted when I check, do the plagiarism check. And that really gives me, angst, not just irritation, but it makes me feel, what the hell? These words cannot be modified, and why is it popping up as plagiarism? But on the other hand, 15% is permitted, so it gets carried away with that. Now, the other part of plagiarism, which I have often faced, is when you quote tables which are adapted from various, other citation. When you're citing tables, or when you're picking up tables and adapting them into your article, you're taking permissions. But till the permission comes, it keeps popping up as plagiarism, and the publisher keeps objecting. How do you handle that?
Very important points raised by you, madam. The thing about certain methods and all, you cannot modify. It is the way it is. So and the softwares will pick it as plagiarism. So I would mention this in the covering letter that dear editor, the software has picked up so and so as plagiarism in my method section, but however there is no way to manage it. And also I would write it in the covering letter to the editor that I have I'm trying to obtain permission from the author for this modified figures. So that's the only way you have to directly communicate. But as said that there are many editors who would not respond back to you. It will be the junior editorial staff who would keep on sending the paper back to you. So that is a challenge. And then you have to just work your way around moving the words here and there to make sure that doesn't pick up. But yeah, this is a constant problem which I have also faced.
And the second aspect I wanted to talk to you, you said you don't be rude and be polite to the reviewers, and respond to the reviewers in a particular way.
Yes,
but
madam.
reviewers' access is not given to us as authors. We are always writing to the editor, or we are feeding online responses to the reviewers, right? So actually, I have no way to communicate any particular point or argument directly to the reviewer except by responding in the points. And sometimes they are so stubborn, and you would sometimes come across two reviewers who have given their comments, one appreciating that very point, and the other contradicting and saying this should not be included. How to handle these type of reviewers?
Yes, madam. So as you said, you have to only respond to the reviewers' comments. We cannot directly interact with them, and it goes to the editor. That is where a good editor matters. So if you have two reviewers, then what I would do is that I would, usually it's the reviewer too, that's a joke, who are always troublesome. So I would say that thank you for your valuable comment. However, this point was raised by reviewer one also. So we have addressed, so because reviewers tend to get reviews from everybody, they tend to read the other reviewers' points. They have done that. So you put the reviewer two in the spot. You put the fight between the two reviewers rather than you and the reviewer, saying that he has asked for that, you have asked for it. So we have tried to do that. And in many of the journals, you can write to the editor when you're resubmitting your manuscripts. There you can say that, dear editor, reviewer 1 and 2 have had different opinions. We have taken the middle path, or we agree with reviewer 1. You can do that.
Okay.
But what I want to say is that, when for the students, at least when reviewer says something, you should not sound rude. We totally disagree with you. This is totally a stupid statement. You should say that you have made a very nice point, but this is our viewpoint, and although we agree with you, but we would like to have it this way. So you have to kind of butter him and then do it. So
no, I can cite you one incident. In fact, when I was writing one case report on hidradenitis suppurativa in an HIV infected child, and I was trying to put my theory in it without any literature backing. And I was proposing that this should be upgraded to a higher stage, because unless we gave antiretroviral therapy, this child didn't do well and he kept having trouble. So we recommend that this be upgraded to a higher stage in the WHO staging. And one reviewer wrote a comment that if the author thinks that he or she knows so much, she should write a book on it and not give one case report.
That's very rude.
So, he wrote very rudely a comment. But what I did not get upset, but I quietly thought over and wrote a response to that point, that thank you for your comment. I am in the process of writing a book too. However, this case is very unusual and people should learn out of it, and therefore I'm putting this case report, and I'm sure you'll be kind enough to consider this as a case report. And I just left it at that. That case report got published.
You're right, ma'am. I think it is, No, I think it's a very common scenario. In fact, when we also review, some of us write, "Thank you, we have nice paper, but sorry, we can't, publish it X, Y, Z observations." But you say thank you, and nice paper written. So there are two ways of dealing with it, and
Exactly.
like the people who are reviewing are also the people who are submitting. So it's I kind of and I think Venkat said very apt thing, and that is the editor's role is very important here.
Yes.
The way they deal
I
this,
agree.
and
I agree.
I think that's very important how they deal with all this.
Yes.
What a conflict, I would say. Any other questions?
People seem to have understood everything, Venkat.
Or they have been sleeping.
No, let's be polite. You and to the participants.
No, any residents out there, any fellows who
There are many, but
want to ask any question?
Sir, I'd like to ask a question.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
Shweta, please.
I wanted to ask you regarding the plagiarism software that you mentioned. I haven't really used it. Can you recommend any?
So most of the softwares are built into the editorial managers, and actually we pay the plagiarism software, per article anywhere $1. So it's not usually freely available, but Google search will actually bring out most of the plagiarism. Any article is freely available in Google. Even if it's a paid article, it comes up on the Google search as plagiarism. But journals have a paid plagiarism software. There is no, it's a software called Authenticate. So there is no free plagiarism software available, but use Google. You would get it. And don't copy and paste. Don't copy paste from an article. Look at the idea and just use your own words. That's what I would say.
so
So as an author,
to add to that, if
Yes,
you are working with a statistician, by and large, those who are professional biostatisticians, they also own this plagiarism software, because I've been always having a statistician on board for almost all my research work in the past. So he always checks it for us and gives us a report of it, which comes out nicely with marked, highlighted stuff, which is plagiarism and which isn't. So you could do that also.
So as an author, if we wanted to check our article for plagiarism, probably the best way would be just to cut paste.
Yeah, cut paste your
paragraphs into
if you
Google.
use your own sentences, you can be confident that you have not plagiarized. If you put your own thoughts, everybody has things his own. Very unlikely that you are going to use the same words and sentences as somebody else who's written a similar article. So if you use your own words,
right.
If you copy paste, obviously it's going to get plagiarized. But if you use your own words, your own ideas, you should be fine.
Shweta, most of these, are as Venkat said, these are inbuilt in the editorial system of the journals, but also, they're licensing. You can buy a plagiarism software and have a license for that. There are a couple of free ones. One is called Plagiarism Checker, which you can use. You just put your text there and it will tell you. I think there's something called as Q-Text or something. That's also a free software which can be checked. I'm not very sure what Grammarly is one which you check for grammar and other things, but that I just heard. I've not used it myself, but that also supposedly now is doing some kind of plagiarism check on the content. So there are some free tools also available, but the good ones are usually licensed and with inbuilt editorial board.
Okay, so thank you so much.
You raised a very important point. Grammarly is a very important software. You can actually incorporate with your Word, Microsoft Word. It's very useful for me, at least. As I said, English is not my first language, so it picks up all the basic minor issues in the paper. You can always get a subscription also for about 5,000 rupees a year, and you can get advanced grammar checking as well.
Okay, so
Venkat, just one more comment I'll make.
Yes,
today's times are so easy and so technology savvy, to write a paper. I remember days when in 80s, when I just post-graduation was over and my teacher was insisting I must write my thesis paper. And I was like, oh my God, I was pulling my hair every time I went to him, and he gave me a lot of homework, and I came home, wrote again, scratched out what was written, rewrote, and then went to him, and again he would scratch one paragraph and say, no, this is not correct, this is the way you should do. today it is so easy. It is on a platter that they can write papers, and yet I don't see enthusiasm amongst juniors to write. And I think we are responsible for that as seniors. We do not really push them and encourage them and guide them. So I appeal to all seniors who are on the group today that please see that your juniors write at least 1 or 2 papers a year, even if it is a case report, because that really gives the greatest pleasure of life. I think when you see your name in black and white, there is no bigger pleasure in medicine than that. So for everybody, I just thought I must say that how easy it is today. You have plagiarism softwares, you have referencing softwares. You don't have to keep marking which reference where. I used to actually write the title in the bracket, then, keep a track of which reference is repeated so that I don't again renumber it. It was difficult. But today it's so easy, you know.
Madam, I'd just like to add a point. Actually, a lot of fellows and residents do the hard work of collecting data and even presenting it in conferences, writing abstracts. It's the next part of writing the paper. They just don't do it because we have a lot of, even if you see our PHO meeting, annual meeting, there are so many abstracts which are presented, but very few of them get written up as papers. The hard work is done. They just need to sit for a few days, get it into a paper form, and it will be helpful for all of us.
But that's an addiction, and you have to develop that addiction.
True,
And that comes, and for the first 1 or 2 papers, someone has to push you. And then the third, fourth onwards, you will do it on your own.
Absolutely true, madam. You have to be pushed. And when somebody pushes you, you are kind of irritated also. Why is he?
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. So thank you very much, Venkat and ma'am, for the inputs, and I really enjoyed this session, and it was really helpful. We usually record these sessions, and we'll share the recordings. We also ask for the slide banks, and which kind of is part of a slide bank. I think this will be a very useful slide bank to have.
It's free to
for everyone. So I think that's something which we'll share with everyone in the group. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week again next Thursday. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your comments and logging in. Thank you, Ria, for the technical support, and Echo, of course, for giving us a platform and making this possible for us to interact. Thank you very much, and a good evening.